So since our last video about Virgin Galactic SPCE ticker symbol, we have gained 17% running up into earnings as we discussed it would happen in our previous video. I'm going to link that video at the end of this video so you guys can check it out and recap what we talked about. A lot of what we talked about in that video is going to apply going forward, so I would suggest you watching it if you haven't seen it yet. So that last video was done on the 21st. And if we look at where we were on the 21st leading up to earnings, it is 16.6%, 17% really, depending on where you got in. If you got in that very next day, you probably made a little more than 17%, 17.9%. But the general idea is 17% is where those profits were at leading up to earnings. Now we have dropped back down to that initial price point where we were right before earnings, where we made that previous video. And a lot of people might be wondering, well, you know, if the earnings were so great, and we actually beat earnings, but if those earnings were so great, if the company is doing so well, why did the price drop back down? So I want you guys to take a look at the chart here on the right, and we're actually looking at SPCE, or we're looking at SPY, which is the S&P 500. And as you guys can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, the last 4 days, we've been seeing the overall market, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ selling off. And so if you look at the last 4 days here, 1, 2, 3, 4, even when it hit earnings, we actually started seeing selling, not just because of the earnings, but we actually saw the selling pressure coming in because the overall market was selling off. Now, I'm not saying that the stock would have not sold off if the overall market was rallying, but as you guys can see, when the market was rallying in SPY and QQQ, which is the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, we actually saw the price rallying with SPCE, which is Virgin Galactic. And then as soon as the overall market began to sell off, we actually started seeing selling happen in SPCE. As you guys know, we gave you guys a heads up about the price rallying into earnings and the second flight. Now, do I think that the price action will continue to rally here into August 10th, which is the second Virgin Galactic flight called the Galactic 2? I still do believe that we're going to see that rally happen. Our initial prediction was that we were going to go up to around $5 leading into earnings and that second flight. So leading into earnings, we actually got to $4.33, which wasn't quite $5, but we did become overbought here on the 4-hour chart. And so when we were oversold, that's when we made our last video about getting in. So if you would have just gotten in at that oversold level and sold when the market became overbought and SPCE became overbought and right before earnings, because we don't like to hold through earnings, you would have made that 16, 17% that we were talking about at the beginning of this video. I do want to go over what the earnings results were, and I want you guys to kind of get an idea of how the company is doing. If you guys haven't caught the earnings report and you guys weren't aware of kind of the results of the earnings report, I do want to go over those with you guys. So Virgin Galactic reported second quarter revenue of 1.87 million, which missed the consensus estimate of 2.69 million. The company reported an adjusted loss of 46 cents per share, which beat analyst estimates for a loss of 51 cents per share. So we beat on the initial estimate here on the loss, but on the revenue, we actually missed, right? So it wasn't the best news, but it wasn't the worst news. And it was actually better than what we were expecting when we talked about earnings coming up in the previous video. So they actually did quite well. The loss was wider than the prior year, primarily driven by an increase in research and development expenses related to the development of its future fleet. Free cash flow used came in at 135 million versus 91 million utilized in second quarter of 2022. Virgin Galactic said its cash position remains strong with cash equivalent and marketable securities of 980 million as of June 30th. During the quarter, we successfully completed 2 space flights in 2 months, including the launch of commercial service in late June with a scientific research mission, said Mitchell Coglaser, CEO of Virgin Galactic. Scheduled for next week, the Galactic 2 mission will deliver a transformational experience for our first private astronauts, and we expect to continue broadening access to space with monthly flights thereafter. Virgin Galactic said it anticipates revenue of approximately $1 million in both the third and fourth quarters. Free cash flow utilized in both quarters is expected to be $120 million to $130 million. Virgin Galactic said it remains on track to deliver Delta-class spaceships for commercial service in 2026. And so that's pretty much kind of a quick update for you guys in terms of how earnings results came in, what their projections are, and kind of what their expectations are moving forward. So obviously they are doing very well. They're staying on track. And considering that the overall market was selling off, it's not very surprising that the stock price dropped right after earnings as well. It was anticipated that we're going to see that regardless, even if the market wasn't selling off, because that tends to happen. You usually see excitement right before earnings, and then you see selling right after earnings is released. Whether it's good or bad news, it can go either way. So I would argue that, you know, the earnings came in pretty decent, pretty well, a lot better than what I was expecting. And so because the overall market was selling off, I wouldn't say primarily, but that's a big part of why we saw that price action drop. The good news is we actually didn't see it drop too bad, right? We actually saw the price action come down to this 366 zone, which is previous support. And as you guys can see, it's a very, very strong support. So I do anticipate that this, if you guys missed that first rally, we've called out multiple opportunities here on SPCE, the 50% gain that we saw, the 17% gain that we just recently saw, and a couple other ones. You guys can watch the videos that I made about SPCE, and you guys would see that every time we do these videos, there's usually a nice rally right after. So nobody has a crystal ball, but there's ways of doing technical analysis and fundamental analysis that helps you kind of get ready and prepare for that next rally that's going to happen. So what I currently believe is we are setting up to be going into another rally. So August 10th is when that next flight is scheduled. Usually we see those rallies happen ahead of those flights, into those flights, sometimes post-flight, but usually you would want to lock in profits right after that flight happens, because then excitement kind of dies off. This time might be a little different, but either way, you'd want to adjust your stop, and you might want to lock in profits once that second flight comes in. So let's go over some technicals. We've gone over the earnings. Let's go over some technical analysis. That way you guys are prepared and see kind of where we're at from a technical standpoint, where that next rally is expected to be, and kind of where things are at. So looking at the 4-hour chart, let's go ahead and grab a drawing tool. Looking at that 4-hour chart, or we can actually go into a daily chart first, kind of do a top-down situation. So looking at the daily chart, that first time around that we were oversold, we were looking at this daily chart here. Let's grab the drawing tool again. We were looking at this convergence that we were seeing right over here. And this is where we made that first video, or that last video about SPCE that we talked about, where we were oversold and we were ready to see that pop. And that's exactly what we saw. We saw that pop. Our target was $5. We didn't quite make it to 5. We made it to 433. But if you were paying attention to overbought and oversold zones, you would be able to lock in those profits. So again, became overbought on the 4-hour chart. That would be a great spot to lock in profits. But long-term, if you're investing long-term into this name, we are starting to see some downside here right when the overall market was selling off. But we are still currently sitting at the support zone at that 360 zone. And honestly, that lowest point that I would be still optimistic about this stock would be that $3 zone, because this general area right here, as you can see, we do tend to bounce around in this general zone from 3 to 360 as a support. So that general zone is a great accumulation zone. I've talked about this multiple times. So again, we are in that general zone. On the daily chart, we could see more selling into this zone if the overall market continues to sell. So if the overall market continues to sell, I do anticipate we might see a little more downside here on SPCE going into that 3 to 360 zone. However, if the overall market begins to sell off leading into August 10th, I do anticipate we will see a turnaround and a push back up. Again, our target's going to be this $5, $6 zone. Currently, it's $6 because of previous resistance. We've seen this $6 act as a previous resistance. So on the way up, we'd be looking for that $6 zone as a first level of resistance, a great spot to lock in profits if you are trading short term. If you're not looking at the stock as a very long-term opportunity, this would be a great place to lock in profits, or potentially adjust your stops and just see how the stock pans out. Again, our support is at that 3 to 360 zone. Always been a great accumulation zone since I've started talking about SPCE over the last like 2-3 months. This has been a great accumulation zone. Every time you jump into this at that zone, you'd see a nice rally to the upside, great place to lock in profits. Another rally to the upside, great place to lock in profits. Rally to the upside, great place to lock in profits. So if you haven't jumped into this, this would be a great place to start considering an accumulation of this particular stock. So just a quick update on the daily chart. Looking at a 4-hour chart, we'll go top down. 4-hour chart, we are looking pretty good as well. Again, a very great place. And that's kind of why I'm talking about potential reversal here on the overall market. We saw the overall market sell off somewhat due to earnings, but we also had a U.S. credit rating that got cut by the Fitch from AA or AAA to AA plus. So that had an impact on the overall market and just general economic data. We go over that on Monday's video. So if you guys aren't subscribed, subscribe. We'll go over that and we'll cover kind of what's been going on and what to expect in the future. So on the 4-hour chart, again, saw that sell off with the overall market selling off. We were really following the general trend of the overall market, but looking at the RSI, we are more so on the oversold side than the overbought side. And we are starting to see some change of color on the MACD from red to orange, indicating to us that we are starting to potentially converge to the upside. So again, if the overall market begins to rally, I do anticipate we're going to see a rally here on SPCE. And then on top of that, we have that second flight coming in and those monthly flights thereafter. So I do anticipate that we'll probably see a rally up to that $5, $6 zone, and then potentially higher if the stock and the excitement lasts with this particular stock. So that's just a quick update to give you guys. Going into some smaller timeframes won't really be too helpful. So I don't want to necessarily jump into that. But we can go over a 30-minute chart for you guys. That way you guys can have an idea of kind of how we're doing. We are trading off of this exponential moving average off of the bigger time frame to give us confirmation. And then on an intraday level, we'll be in and out based on that exponential moving average. If you guys want to know more about that, check out the third link in the description. We can work together closely and kind of get to know what you need to be doing to be profitable in the market if you're not already. So again, on the 30-minute, again, converging to the upside, kind of confirming what we saw on that 4-hour chart. We are at a support. We're converging to the upside. We have the second flight coming up. And if the overall market turns around, I do anticipate this is going to continue to rally. So that's just a quick update for you guys on SPCE. Let me know what you guys think about this particular stock, what you guys expect to see leading into that second flight. Do you think the stock is going to go up, if it's going to continue to sell off? A lot of people thought it was going to sell off significantly on those earnings, and that's actually not what we saw. And there's a lot of people that are very I guess they think that the stock is going to drop to like $1 or even 50 cents because of the dilution, because they are trying to raise capital. They did file for it, but they haven't been doing it yet. So I don't see a reason for the market to react to that just yet until they do actually begin to offload shares and flood the actual supply with more shares, right? They haven't started doing that yet. So I wouldn't anticipate that we're going to see that at these significant moments where the company is actually trying to raise capital. They would want their stock to go up in price. They wouldn't want to dilute it when there's something significant as a second flight in those monthly flights happening. Again, I'm not the CEO. I don't know how they think or what they expect to do, but that's just from my perspective. Let me know what you guys think. That's just a quick update again on the overall market or on the overall stock, what I anticipate to see just to do a quick recap, we'll look at a 4-hour chart and give you guys some final levels to consider. So looking at the 4-hour chart, $6 is going to be that big zone that I'm going to be watching for us to see a rally to that zone on that second flight. $5, $6, when the market or when the stock does become overbought, as we saw over here, that's when I'm going to be looking to lock in profits. At the current moment, I do anticipate that we are at great levels to accumulate, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. Is I'm going to be accumulating more SPCE, and then once we see that next pop like we saw here, I'm going to be locking in profits. So that's just a quick update. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, turn on your post notifications, and I'll see you guys on the next one.